everyone in the house, and hi everyone on our live stream. Thanks for coming today. Today is going to be a fun little Valentine's Day presentation. I'll introduce myself first. So my name is Brooke Biddlecombe. I am a PhD candidate, and I work on polar bears and Arctic whales. And I also get the pleasure of coming to work for Polar Bears International every once in a while and talk to people about polar bears. So with that, let's get into dating and mating in polar bears. Okay, so I'm going to start with just a touch of background information so we're all on the same page. So generally, the polar bear mating season, while this will vary depending on the population, it generally occurs between March and May. And this is because this is also a polar bear's primary hunting or feeding period. So if you think about it like this is the time of year when bears are doing the most hunting out on the ice, that means they have the most energy, so they have the most extra energy to devote to finding mates and hopefully making babies. A little bit more background about kind of the things that are involved in mating. So mating itself is kind of, there's a lot that goes on, but it kind of is an interaction between three main things. Access to females, resource availability, like I said, more food, more energy, more mating. And the spatial patterns of other bears. So of course that's a bit more specific to polar bears. But polar bears especially, this is interesting because there is a really unpredictable nature of resource distribution for bears. So if you think about it, like sea ice is vast. There are seals kind of randomly spotted throughout the sea ice. So that means the distribution of mates is vast and unpredictable. So that's how our resource availability ties into the spatial patterns of other bears. They have to find each other, and thus ties into access to females and gives us mating opportunities. So overall, I would say that mating in polar bears is generally fairly well understood. Many locations, so a little bit more info. So this map is our 19 polar bear subpopulations across the circumpolar Arctic. Many of these populations are lacking what we call quantitative data on mating behavior and mating characteristics. So quantitative is just like numbers. Rather than just watching what bears do, we want to find some numbers that explain it. So the presentation I'm giving you today is actually focusing on our Beaufort Sea subpopulation, so where this blue circle just came up. So no, I am not talking about our Churchill bears, but fret not. What we learn about our Beaufort Sea bears is very, very applicable to our Western Hudson Bay bears. So what you learn about those bears will also teach you about these bears. Okay, so basically, this research, I had a whole lot of research questions that I wanted to cover. So we're going to go through my thought process and what I wanted to learn, and hopefully what you'll learn by the end of this. So my first question, pretty broad, when are bears mating? So to do this, we basically wanted to document temporal patterns in mating annually. So temporal is just the timing. When are we seeing pairs, basically? Then wanted to see, are males and females different sizes? So this is examining sexual dimorphism. Sexual dimorphism is just a term for males and females being different sizes. So we wanted to see the extent of that. 3, I wanted to see, is there a size difference in males that are mating and males that are not mating? Right, so I wanted to compare both the age and the size of our paired males and our unpaired males to see if there's any difference in our males that are getting a little more lucky, if you will. Next, I wanted to look at what labial development in females can tell us about receptivity to mating. So think about this like we're pretty familiar with dogs, right? So in a female that is of reproductive age, there'll be changes in the physiology of the labia that kind of show that she's receptive to mating. So we wanted to see if the extent of labial swelling in these bears changed based on if they were with males or if they were not, and what that might mean. And finally, a little bit about males. I wanted to see, do tooth and body injuries reflect breeding behavior? So I looked at canine tooth breakage and bodily injuries with age, a little bit on females, but mostly on males. Okay, let's get into it. So generally, what did we do? Well, polar bears were captured, like I said, in the Beaufort Sea population in spring from 1970 to 2014. So I will say I was not alive in 1970, nor was I capturing polar bears. So this is data that many colleagues before me collected. And when they captured a bear, they collected a ton of data. They collected sex, age, number and sex of accompanying bears, general size, as well as mass or weight, cuts and scars, like I said, body condition, reproductive status, so that's that labial development, and location. So everything you can think of pretty much. So let's get into what we found. Basically, so our kind of general trends, over the 44-year study period, in 31 of those years, pairs together were observed. And there was a total of 135 male-female pairs observed. Now, that doesn't seem like a ton over 44 years, but think about it like this. You're just flying out over the sea ice and hoping to encounter a bear. It's always lucky to find a bear out on the sea ice for us, not for the average person walking around. It's not lucky to run into a bear. But it's even more lucky for us to run into a bear that has other bears with it. So 135 is pretty good. So based on the observations of bears that were paired, we found kind of peak mating season was March 25th to May 21st, and the mean or kind of maximum date of most mating pairs observed was April 21st. And this last point is pretty interesting. 88% of observed pairs had one male. That means that 12% of pairs had two males. So this means that 12% of observed mating groups had two males actively fighting over access to the female, which is pretty cool. Okay, so this graph basically just shows, pretty straightforward, this is the number of observed pairs over time. So you can see, right, the most pairing is occurring kind of mid to late April. Okay, so getting into age and weight, like I talked about. So within observed pairs, the average age of a male, like it says up here, is 11 and a half years. And on average, they are about 365 kilograms. In a pair, a female was on average 9.7 years old and considerably smaller with an average age of 186 kilograms, or an average weight, sorry, of 186 kilograms. So you can see, right, this is pretty obvious. Within a pair, the male was on average 2 times the size of the female. Now this ranged, and we saw a number of males that were actually 3 times the size of the female. So that sexual dimorphism, remember, was pretty drastic. Now our unpaired males, right, so I also had data of males that were just observed kind of wandering alone. Those on average were 9.9 years old, and they weighed 337 kilograms. So what does that tell us? Well, our paired males were significantly older and significantly larger than our unpaired males. Now, this, if you think about it, it does suggest that the older, bigger males mated more or had more access to more mating opportunities. So it looks like females had a tendency to choose bigger, older males, right? They went for the tough guys, basically. And in this picture, so this is a male and this is a female, and you can see this male's pretty bloodied up. He's had a rough go. And this male is still the successful one in the mating situation. So you can see, even though he's big, he still had a bit of a tough fight to actually have access to that female. So some more graphs. These ones, I'll explain them a little bit. So this top graph, again, this is just showing the number of bears, a proportion of the total number of bears, and their age. So our paired males are the black bars. So if we look at the black bars, we can see the majority of paired males are kind of in this age range of like 10 to 15, whereas the gray bars are unpaired males, and you can see most of our unpaired males are these really young guys. This makes sense, right? A young bear is not going to be super good at competing to mate with a female. They're smaller, they don't have as much status, and they're just not as good at fighting, honestly. So of course, most of our unpaired males were younger. Down here just shows the kind of age breakdown of our females in pairs. So you can see most of female mating kind of occurs in females that are like 4 to 8 or 9 years old. But as you can see, females will mate all the way up to 31 years old. So a good healthy polar bear has a lot of really good reproductive years. So what does that mean? Like I said, our paired males were older than unpaired males, which suggests that both age and body size play a role in mate competition. Why do I say age and body size? Well, we know age is important, but body size is connected to that because male polar bear size plateaus at about 10 years of age. So older bears are bigger bears. That's just how it works, up until 10 years of age. So those younger bears that are unpaired are very obviously smaller bears. But I ran some math. I won't get into the math, but the math says that age overall is the most important factor in determining mate pairing. And it's more important than time of year that the male encounters the female, and it's more important than body condition, so that's the amount of fat. So an older male, more likely to pair with a female than a really fat one. Okay, so now we'll talk a little bit about labial development. So basically what we found was labial development was significantly higher in females without cubs. This makes sense. A female with cubs stays with her cubs and raises them for 2 to 2.5 years. So she's obviously not going to be receptive to mating for that entire time. So of course you won't see any labial development. And this second point, which I think is most interesting, is that paired females had significantly higher labial development than lone females. Okay? So if you think about a female that is in their reproductive age, you might assume that they would all have equal amounts of labial development. But because we saw higher development in females that were with males, it likely doesn't just indicate a receptivity to mating. It's thought now that with heightened labial development when a male is present, that there might be sort of this necessary interaction with a male that triggers a receptivity to mating. And this makes sense because when a mating pair gets together, they stay together for 18 days on average. That's a lot of time. So maybe those first few days are kind of triggering this receptivity to mating in a female, and then mating can occur for maybe like the last half of that period of time. So that's a really interesting new finding, and that's different than how we originally thought this receptivity might occur. Okay, moving into talking a little bit about those canine teeth, cuts, and scars. So, like I said, I looked at females a little bit, but mostly males. Males showed a greater increase in canine breakage with age than females. So basically, we saw more older male bears with more broken canine teeth than older female bears, if that makes sense. Then these bottom 2 points, just focusing on males, minor and major cuts on males' faces and necks increase significantly with age. So we noticed more and more cuts with older bears, and here the scars also increased with age. This makes sense, right? Of course your scars are going to be cumulative. You get a cut last year and you get a cut 5 years ago, you're going to have those scars forever, pretty much. But what's really interesting is the number of scars started to plateau in bears in their early 20s. So before we talk a little bit more about what that means, some more graphs, so fun. This one is basically looking at cuts. So this is age, and basically this is the probability that the bear that we see has no cuts, minor cuts, or major cuts. So you can see our young bears, it's way more probable that they'll have no cuts at all because our younger bears are not yet mating. Then as we get older, we see the probability of both minor and major cuts increase with age, which makes sense. Here we can see the number or the severity, I guess, of scarring, right? So 1, very few scars. 3, that's a whole lot of scars. So with age, you can see kind of, until they're about 5 years old, they don't really have much going on. And then it increases with age and again starts to plateau around 20 years old. Now the thought is that maybe these older bears are just old and no longer interested in mating. So that means they're no longer interested in competing against other males. Okay. Or our older bears are big, fat, and they have a lot of status, a lot of strength. So when they've reached 20 years old, they're so big and so intimidating, they don't even have to compete, right? A younger male just looks at them, knows they'll lose, and leaves. So they don't have to fight for access to females anymore. We're not really sure which it is. It could be both. So a little bit more work will have to go into seeing what's going on there. So what does all this mean? Basically, the patterns of cuts and scars really clearly shows that male-male competition is a big factor in polar bear mating, right? We're seeing signs that they are fighting for access to females. The tendency for females to pair with larger, older males shows that there's sexual dimorphism in mated pairs, right? So these two things, male-male competition and sexual dimorphism, are the two strongest characteristics that support what we call a polygynous mating system. Polygynous mating system means a female mates with few males. Males mate with many, many females. Okay, so males have lots of competition to access a limited number of females, and females can be really choosy, right? They only mate with like 1, maybe 2 males, so they can be really, really choosy about it. So, like I said, females, super choosy, can pick those big, strong males, no problem. And males have to compete, have to work really, really hard for those mating opportunities, which, kind of ends up with them looking not so great by the time they get those mating opportunities, but it's worth it. And with that, I would like to thank my collaborators on this paper we have up here on the slides, and of course, all of the incredible funders that make this very expensive Arctic research happen. And with that, I'm very, very happy to answer any questions.
My question is, so if a female is out on the ice with cubs or yearlings, whatnot, would the male kill her cubs or babies to mate with her?
This is an incredible question. So, this is something that occurs. Males have been known to kill cubs because the idea, of course, is if a female doesn't have cubs, she can be pushed into estrus or being receptive to mating. So yes, that is something that has been observed. The extent that this happens, we're not really sure, but this is pretty much the primary reason why females with cubs will stay very, very far away from lone males.
Do the males kill cubs to eat them as well, or do they only kill them to have access to the mother?
Yeah, so it has been also observed that males will kill cubs just to eat them. Honestly, I mean, if you think about it, right, if food is scarce, a polar bear cub is a meal, unfortunately. And you know, like the same way that polar bears will take down seal pups because they're easy, I mean, a polar bear cub is a baby animal that's easy. So yes, that is also another reason why infanticide or the killing of infants of the same species occurs.
With the male bears, does the desire to breed override the desire to feed?
Yeah. Yeah, so during mating season, so for example, like for some of the work that I've done, when we're in a helicopter out on the ice, you can see, like, so the way that a male moves when they're hunting is very directional. Once they smell a seal, well, any bear, very directional. Once they smell a seal, they're walking to that seal. But you can always tell if you're following a set of tracks, you can tell when a bear gets like basically like a whiff of a female. So females leave pheromones in their tracks, and that's how males track females, is actually by smelling their tracks. So you can tell when a male bear has kind of sniffed out a female's tracks, because they'll kind of like, you know, like wiggle in a little bit towards the female tracks. You can see they follow her, then they'll go out and then come back in. And it really looks like a male can be derailed from hunting behavior the instant that there's female tracks nearby. That's a personal observation, but I would say for sure, yeah.
I was also wondering too, you said the females with the broken teeth, there's fewer than the males. Are the broken teeth a part of like the mating process, or would it be likely it's maybe when it has cubs, it's protecting itself and its cubs against a predatory male?
Yeah, this is a great question. I wouldn't say we have like great data on this, but I would venture to say that most of the canine breakage in females would be from defending against males. Polar bear canine teeth are huge, so it takes a lot to break a tooth. So it would have to be like a very aggressive interaction. Yeah.
So you said you looked at some aspects of scarring in females, but not a lot. So what was your purpose for looking, and why a little bit? Or
Yeah. So basically, I wanted to look at cuts and scarring in females just to make sure that the pattern of cuts and scarring we see in males is driven by sex and thus driven by that male-male competition, right? If we saw the exact same pattern in cuts and scarring in females, then we would need a completely different theory about why those cuts were happening to the extent that they were. That was not the case. The female data, I would say there wasn't really a trend with age, and like the extent of cuts was way lower, and it was kind of like erratic and very random. Yeah, so that those clear patterns that are associated with age were only in the males.
so do you have any sense why the females, what the scarring was from?
I would say likely kind of to go with the canine tooth breakage, probably defending cubs from males. And honestly, probably also the actual mating. I mean, polar bears, they got big claws. They're very aggressive animals. And yeah, like the mating situations can be a bit aggressive. So that would also likely be the cause of some of that. All right. Well, thank you everyone for the questions, and thank you everyone for tuning in at home. I hope you enjoyed my little polar bear Valentine's Day talk. And yeah, thanks for coming out.